Welcome to Basic Brewing Video. I'm James Spencer.
I'm Steve Wilkes.
And we're here on the central coast of California at Firestone Walker Brewery. A brewery that's famous for?
Beer.
Yes, and not only beer, but beer that's aged in barrels and fermented in barrels, which is extremely rare, which is why we're here.
Yep.
And Steve had a chance to talk to the man responsible for the process.
We're here at the Firestone Walker Brewery in
El Paso de Robles, California.
See, I'm afraid to say that, but I'm standing with my good friend Matt Brentelson, who is the head brewer here. We're becoming friends ever more quickly as we sample this beer.
Cheers.
Cheers. Tell me what we're drinking.
This is our Walker's Reserve, which is a robust porter, 50% fermented in the Firestone Oak Union.
Oh man, this is terrific beer. And the Oak Union, this is what we're talking about in here, aren't we?
Well, actually,
That's not the union system, but getting it onto the barrels.
Correct. So we're standing in our oak aging cellar, and behind us are approximately 100 bourbon, wheat whiskey, brandy, used Union barrels, which are American oak, and some French and American oak wine barrels that we're aging strong beers in that will ultimately find their way into our anniversary program. So it's the component, so to speak, of our beer blending program.
How do you go about deciding which beer gets into which barrel?
Well, some of that's just experimentation. We found, for instance, that our Russian Imperial Stout marries very well with bourbon barrels. We found that beers like Sean Paxton's Saucer Full of Secrets and our Imperial Brown Ale seem to work really well with brandy barrels. The beer that we're standing by right here is what we're affectionately calling double barrel ale. We took the recipe and concentrated it to twice the alcohol content, but used the same hopping regime.
Wow.
And that is being aged in retired Union barrels. So it's all an experiment. We've been doing this for not quite 4 years, so we're still babies at it. We're still trying to figure it out.
Now, these are retired Union barrels. Tell me what they did before they were retired.
Okay. Well, the main focus, or Firestone's focus when it comes to barrels, has been for the last 13 years fermentation of ales in oak, primary fermentation. And we've spent kind of exhaustedly a large amount of energy trying to explain to people that aging beers in oaks is not our focus. Our focus is fermentation in oak. That's a throwback to the family's roots in winemaking. They've been winemakers for 35 years. It also is a throwback to some of our English heritage. David Walker, one of our principals, was born and raised in the UK and has a great affection for true English pale ale from the Burton area. The state of the art in fermentation technology 150 years ago in Burton-on-Trent, and essentially all pale ales made there were made in Union sets. And that was a means by which beer could be fermented in an oak barrel. Their focus in Burton-on-Trent was the geometry of the barrel and how it affected fermentation, and ultimately how good the yeast, the clarification of the beer, and the yeast that came from those unions. And brewers really latched onto that technology for those reasons. They weren't interested in imparting oak flavor on the finished product. So our twist on the union concept is to use barrels as a fermentation vessel and to also impart what we call the fifth element, or oak. We have water, malt, hops, yeast, and at Firestone we have oak. And we're making critter-free beer in this case. We're not looking for Brettanomyces or Lactobacillus or Pediococcus. In fact, we ward all of that off. The lab spends a lot of time sampling the Union sets and trying to make sure that we're making very clean beer. We also do not collect the yeast off the Union sets. So our focus is to ferment beer cleanly, be able to push that beer from the barrels after 7 days of primary fermentation to a stainless steel vessel where we can blend it together. We then clean the barrel very simply with hot water and fill it again with fermenting wort and allow that fermentation to carry forward. So the Union barrels are used every week, and we get a new turn out of them every week. So in our Union set, we'll produce over 5,000 barrels of beer this year that is 100% oak fermented.
Now, I noticed that on the barrels themselves that they have different toast levels. Why would you do that?
Well, toasting is critical, especially in these type of barrels, to bring about the flavor components that we're interested in acquiring in the finished product. Those being just toasted oak character, for lack of any other term. I mean, you can kind of imagine what that tastes like. The vanilla component, the coconut component, and some of those. So Toasting levels, I liken it to roasting coffee beans or even roasting malt. Every maltster and every coffee roaster has a different regime. The barrel cooper that we work with likes to work between medium and heavy toast levels. We get slightly different flavors from each of those toast levels, and we try to blend those in to create complexity in the finished product. So
Now, this isn't like the process that the bourbon makers would have, where their barrels are charred.
Right.
They're not charred.
the charring has a couple different effects. One, you get a different impact on the finished product when it comes to flavor. But that char also works in a bit like a charcoal filter, and it also has an absorption type of an activity
Right.
that can clean up the product. But certainly, what a bourbon maker is looking to get out of a barrel is different than what a winemaker, or in our case, a brewer, is looking from a toasted barrel.
Okay. Wow, this is very fascinating to me. How would a home brewer take this concept and come forward with it, or come down with it to the level of a guy making 5 or 10 gallons of beer? Is it even possible?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at this barrel. It's about 55 to 60 brewing or gallons of beer that's in there. So I've often said, and we've given many barrels away to home brewers and say, hey, have a club event, get a few home brewers together and attempt this, or age a beer in a barrel, get together and blend some beers together. So I think using a true barrel is definitely conceivable for the home brewer. Certainly there are other oak products. There are oak chips and cubes and staves and other things that a home brewer could use on a smaller scale.
Will you get the same effect from those as you would from being in the barrel itself?
You know, I think it's really hard to replicate what happens in this barrel, especially when you're talking fermentation. You have this very specific geometry and the size and everything else involved. But certainly if you're trying to impart oak flavor on a finished product, those downstream products work just fine. You know, it's well known that many large winemakers have moved away from barrels and have gone to staves and chips and cubes. Right. I'm sure that the purists would argue, just like the endless debate between whole leaf hops and hop pellets or hop extracts, you know.
Right.
Can a beer be made with those? Absolutely. Is it exactly the same? Probably not. Is it good? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's kind of my theory of homebrewing too. It may not be the exact same thing, but it's close.
Right.
Listen, Matt, it's been great to visit with you today.
Yeah, thank you.
And I can't wait to see you and hear your talk on barrels at NHC.
Right on. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Come and visit us on the web. At basicbrewing.com, you can find archive lists of both our audio and video podcasts on home brewing. You can also find our DVDs, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and our latest edition, Introduction to Wine Kits. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Write to james@basicbrewing.com, steve@basicbrewing.com, or just use the contact form on basicbrewing.com. Something that is rarely done. And Steve, hello! Hello!
Hello!
Hello, Central!
Is this the party to whom I'm speaking?